Radio.
6 Music. You are now entering a parallel universe.
And wipe your feet on the way in.
Marc Riley, BBC 6 Music.
Jethro Tull with Locomotion Breath with a longer intro than either myself or Bobby Hughes remembered. Bit of a worry then. I thought Bobby Crush had gotten a tune called Locomotion Breath and things had got mixed up, but no.
No, mate, I was slightly worried there. I could see the concern on your face as you were hovering over the dial there. But
I could see yours as well, mate. So, cards on the table. We were both like, what?
Hey, we got there, didn't we? From Aqualung, of course, which is out on this week, because we're looking at the NME 22nd of May 1971. Before we get into this, mate, I'm very proud of you. Well done for changing a wheel. Well done.
Yeah,
Great.
So I'm very proud. Thank you very much, mate. I don't think Gid was impressed, but I mean, you know.
Well, he doesn't drive, does he? So,
No.
He didn't quite understand anyway. No. So, May 71 here in the news. NME reports from the wedding of Mick Jagger and Bianca Macias in Saint-Tropez, where they tied the knot in a small church high above the resort. The reception was in a disused hall, and Terry Reid is said to have entertained. 3 of the Faces were there, and Paul and Ringo as well, plus wives. It says here, Mick and Bianca sailed away in a luxury yacht for a honeymoon, leaving behind a worried manager at their hotel, where many wedding guests had occupied rooms and left through a misunderstanding without paying their bills the next morning. Oh. Surely not. Oh. On page 10, with their current single at number 10 in this week's NME chart, Free have disbanded. The decision to break up was taken during their recent Australian tour. It's already taken effect, and the members of the group are at present planning new bands. So ends another era in pop music with the demise of a group which reached the peak of success only last year, when All Right Now was a major worldwide hit. A spokesman said the boys felt they'd achieved as much as they possibly could within their existing framework. It's expected that Paul Kossoff and Simon Kirke will stay together and assemble a new group, of which they'll be joint leaders. Paul Rodgers and Andy Fraser will individually form their own groups built around themselves. It did seem to be very premature, didn't it, this Free kind of disbanding. And they did get back together again not long after this for a while. They hadn't sort of quite made their minds up, had they, that they wanted to go their separate ways.
Is that right? I mean, all of my knowledge of Free really is with the benefit of hindsight, because I was never into them and I was only a toddler. But I do know, obviously, that eventually Paul Rodgers did go off and form Bad Company with Mick Ralphs, who left Mott the Hoople to do so. And it worked. Financially, it worked for them anyway, because they were big in America, weren't they?
Yeah,
but
definitely.
They were plodding, weren't they?
They were plodding. I'm glad you said it, Mark. Well done. But I think Paul Rodgers in Free, from what I've read and understand, he felt a little bit constrained and felt like his voice wasn't being heard. So I think that was a factor, I believe.
It's strange, though, isn't it, how he would end up in Queen, Paul Rodgers, because, I mean, he has got a good voice, you know, and some would say a great voice, but it's a blues voice, and
Definitely.
never anybody. It's a little bit like Kenny Jones joining The Who. He joined because they were mates, really, not because he could fill the shoes of Keith Moon. Not that many could.
Yeah, that was exactly it. Also in the centre pages here, among attractions booked for this year's National Jazz and Blues Festival at Reading are Rory Gallagher, Al Cooper, The Faces, Wishbone Ash, Terry Reid, Shana Na, Ralph McTell, Medicine Head and Van der Graaf Generator. The 3-day festival is being staged on an open-air site alongside the River Thames. Tickets priced at £2. Very different from what the Reading Festival became later on, of course. But it looks here, they're just trying to please everybody. Is there something for everybody here? You've got like Van der Graaf, bit of prog, Ralph McTell, some folk, Shana Na, some 50s revival stuff. You've got your hairy rock, and you've got your sort of good time blues and roll Faces.
Yeah, it is eclectic, which is a good thing, I suppose.
It is. The Everly Brothers are returning to Britain in September for a lengthy visit, during which they'll undertake concert, TV and cabaret dates. This just got me because the idea of the Everlys playing in cabaret, which I know they did, and a lot of people did. Roy Orbison did it, of course. You know, he played Batley Variety Club, for example. But the idea of these real sort of iconic legends, these giants of rock and roll and pop, you know, so influential, playing tiny little cabaret clubs for a week and a half.
Well, you know, you say that. They weren't, I'm not being pedantic, but they weren't that tiny, were they? I mean, I think Batley Variety was probably quite big. And the Golden Garter in Manchester was a lot smaller. And I did go to it. I saw Dollar there and the Nolans.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But the, you know, they had to get through that period in the career where they'd been massively famous and then were a little bit like, oh, you're yesterday's man. And then it's that stick around long enough and you become a legend, which obviously happened to particularly Roy Orbison.
Yeah, of course. The other thing as well, as you point out, places like Batley Variety Club, they were really, really well paid, weren't they? They were a genuine rival to the London clubs. They just perhaps didn't have all the nightlife going on around it. But as a venue, it was a lucrative gig.
Yeah, they were chicken in the basket kind of places, weren't they?
Yeah, just underneath that, our old mate Tom Paxton's October concert tour is to be promoted by MAM, for whom a spokesman revealed it will last 6 weeks. MAM is also bringing in Velvet Underground, the group which started with Andy Warhol, progressed to hard rock, and is now playing more in the mainstream category. Again, it seems a little bit incredible in hindsight. The Velvets end up playing, I don't know, Leicester Poly, Speakeasy in London, Birmingham University. Although it was a different lineup at this point, wasn't it? You'd have Mo Tucker was still there, Doug Yule, and you had Walter Powers and Willie Alexander. So it was a strange one.
Was that the lineup? So it wasn't Doug and Billy Yule then? It was Mo Tucker back?
No, sadly. Still on the live front, the Buddy Miles Express refused to play at Birmingham Town Hall on Wednesday of last week when Miles looked out and saw there were only 300 people in the audience. This was just one of those things. I wonder if, is it a sign of a band who will just play no matter what? A mate of mine went to see, this is quite a few years ago, went to see an Ian Hunter solo somewhere it might have been Wrexham or somewhere, and there was hardly anybody there. And he said he played one of the best sets he's ever seen. He just got down to it, invited everybody up to the front and said, let's just get on with this. Let's have a great time while we're here.
Well, yeah, I mean, we the Fall played a gig in 1978. I hadn't been in the band very long, and it was promoted by Green from Scrittability Yellow Green, and there was about 12 people there. But you just got to crack on. I mean, those people, 12 people have paid to get in, and they want to see you, so you got to do it.
Yeah, very memorable for them, I imagine, as well. In the news as well, Ken Howard and Alan Blakely, who penned the title song for Frankie Howard's highly successful film Up Pompeii, have now written the theme song for his follow-up, which is Up the Chastity Belt, at present being shot at Elstree Studios. It's called A Night with a K for My Nights with a K, and Eartha Kitt is flying in from America specially to record it for the soundtrack and as a single. Ned Sherrin's producing the picture, and Dave D is added to the list of personalities making guest appearances. I mean, it's okay from what I remember. It's certainly not Up Pompeii, is it? Let's face it.
No, Frankie Howard was a proper one-off, wasn't he?
He was.
But Eartha Kitt, a legend. So that was good. Thumbs up for that.
Yeah, sure. Just talking of Eartha Kitt, by the way, there is a documentary, I think, which is out on Radio 4 at the minute about Batley Variety Club, I think, and there is footage of her going to Batley Market and against her kind of wishes initially, trying some tripe. There is some...
really?
Yeah, and then leading everybody in a big sing-along. It's amazing, apparently.
Well, she was proper militant and really right on it, wasn't she? She was great.
She was, totally. Anyway, to the singles then. Delphonics?
Yeah, Didn't I Blow Your Mind?
That's right. Look at the NME, 22nd of May 1971. So I'll play the Delphonics there as a bit of a belated tribute to Tom Bell, who co-wrote it and arranged it and produced it, and was one of those, it's just such an important figure in the development of what became known as Philly Soul, the Philly sound.
Right, okay, well done.
Okay, so NME here, page 16, Peter Noon, interviewed by Richard Green to promote his debut single, Oh You Pretty Things. He says, David Bowie, who wrote the song, played piano on the record. I think he wrote this one just for me. I think he's the best songwriter since Paul McCartney. He goes on to say he's now looking for a more mature audience away from Herman's Hermits. He says, I think Mark Bolan is the 70s equivalent of Herman's Hermits. You watched him on Top of the Pops and see him doing the big pop star bit. Fairly ludicrous, I think.
Well, I mean, it was a teeny bop thing, the T-Rex, wasn't it? But,
it was.
But I mean, it's just another one of those oh no moments. But Bowie did play piano for Peter Noon on Top of the Pops, didn't he? But it just got erased.
It did. Oh, sadly. It goes on to say he'd like Herman's to do a festival, he says, following a really loud group and do the whole 1964 Herman's Hermits bit just to see how it went. Just give it to them, he says. And NME says he demonstrated what he meant by standing up, adopting a knock-kneed stance, putting on a little boy's grin and clapping his hands in the air, patter cake style. Some visuals you can do without, I think, Mark.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like the stuff of stardom, does it? But it worked for them. Again, massive in America, wasn't he?
He was massive in America, absolutely huge. Alan Smith here talking about the Jackson 5. He says, Jackson Mania is currently sweeping the USA when they play concerts, usually in the major venues in the major cities. They break attendance records wherever they go. Every single released by the Five in America has crossed the 2.5 million mark. In a style reminiscent of the Beatles' Monkees' heyday, a new Motown magazine has just been launched in America, the first issue entirely devoted to the Jackson 5. The leading light is the littlest and youngest, Michael Jackson. I gather He's aged 12 and goes to 7th grade. Motown Vice President Smokey Robinson reveals how they were a little bit foxy at first when we offered them a contract. And I thought, hey, these guys are real professionals. And Diana Ross, who discovered them, says the group is comprised of the most fantastic artists I've ever seen. And also Ann Moses, NME's woman out in America, says they're all swatting for school exams at the present. Won't be singing again until July. So this was that idea that Smokey Robinson they're talking about, how they seem like professionals from the off, was largely down to their father, wasn't it, Joe Jackson, who really he entered them into all sorts of talent contests up and down the country and just really worked them, let's being kind, worked them very, very hard. Let's put it that
Quite brutal, wasn't it, really, if we're honest?
It was.
But it's funny because we had Lawrence on tonight and Mozart Estate, and he said that he always wanted to be a cartoon band, and when Gorillaz came along, it kind of took away the, the dream, really. But I would imagine that it was actually, initiated by the Osmonds and the Jackson 5 cartoons in the 70s, that we used to watch when we were toddlers.
Yeah, definitely. Album review time. You've got Leonard Cohen's Songs of Love and Hate reviewed by Alan Evans. He says, what a depressing guy this Cohen is. He sings as if he's a bad loser at a poker game, or as if it's an effort to get the words out, all in a dull monotone. But he does let you hear the words he sings, and if you listen carefully and think a bit, you can get the message. I found the album a thoroughly depressing experience. If you want to be depressed, this is for you. And you think, well, each to their own, etc. Hindsight is easy, but then he reviews Carole King's Tapestry underneath. This noted composer writes all her own material, plays the piano for herself, and she sings 12 interesting folk-sounding ballads, beat songs, and shuffling blues. But I found that Carole's voice was a little samey throughout, as if she wanted to get the songs over and done with. Most of the tracks are too cold and so technically correct that they lack humanness. You can get one thing wrong, but you can't get two.
No, he won't thank you for all that, Bob, I tell you.
Meanwhile, Alan Smith reviews Ram by Paul and Linda McCartney. He says, what in the name of all that's gone before is happening to Paul McCartney? His newly released second solo album, Ram, is an excursion into almost unrelieved tedium. The melodies are weak, the ideas are stale, the arrangements are messy. Much of it is like listening to the sound of Bobby Sock's Middle-Class America set to music. So nobody's happy. What's wrong with people?
Hard to please, or what?
Crikey. And very briefly, America Calling. Nancy Lewis goes to see Chris Christopherson at the bitter end, said he's really good. One of the songs he plays is one of her favourites, Sunday Morning Coming Down. It just reminded me of that great story, of course, which must have been maybe 2 years before this, where he landed a helicopter on Johnny Cash's lawn to hand him a tape, and Johnny Cash later confessed that he just chucked it in the lake.
He chucked it in the lake, didn't he? I tell you what, Bob, I think we should just plough on through here and we'll finish with Dave and Ansel Collins, because just looking at the time that we've got in front of us.
All right, mate, that's absolutely fine. So, gigs this week. You've got Funkadelic at Cardiff University. You've got Rory Gallagher at the Melody Rooms in Norwich. Cat Stevens at Harrogate Opera House. T-Rex at Green's Playhouse in Glasgow. The Faces at Liverpool Stadium. King Crimson at the Regal in Cambridge. Yes at Liverpool University. The Fantastics at the Tin Hat in Kettering. Mountain at the Lyceum in London. Sly and the Family Stone at Royal Albert Hall. East of Eden at St Mary's College in Twickenham. An all-star jam session at Bumpers in Piccadilly Circus with Keith Moon, Jasper Lowell and P.P. Arnold. Pentangle at Leeds Town Hall. Third Ear Band and Egg at Doncaster Top Rank. You've got Mott the Hoople at Southport Floral Hall. Wow.
Right.
Oh, great time to see him, just before they were going to take off. And the Rock and Roll Revival at Blundell Park in Cleethorpes, featuring Marty Wilde, Billy J. Kramer, Raving Rupert and others, plus special DJ, radio and TV personality, the zany Mr. Kenny Everett, it says here. And in Cabaret, mentioned him before, Peter Noone and Herman's Hermits at Manchester Bellevue Variety Club, alongside Ken Dodd and the Joe Loss Orchestra. Did you ever go to Bellevue?
I went to the, it was called the Elizabethan Ballroom, which is where I saw The Clash and Magazine and all of those bands playing. And then there was a King's Hall. At the King's Hall, I saw Public Image Limited with the pop group. I saw The Who with Steve Gibbons' band, and The Fall opened for Buzzcocks there. So, a few times, yeah.
Yeah, excuse me, ignorance. Okay. On the live front there, page 17, you've got, this is a new venue, Crystal Palace Bowl, reviewed by Nick Logan. He said, despite the cloudburst during Pink Floyd's closing closing set that reduced the 10,000 plus crowd into a bedraggled sea of sodden colour, the Crystal Palace Bowl looked on Saturday's reckoning the most promising site yet for a manageable near-London open-air rock venue, borne along on a quadraphonic sound system in use for the first time at a British festival. There was sufficient volume and clarity to the music to dispense with the need for the crowd to jam as close as possible to the stage. You don't think about that, do you? About sort of festivals of a certain era where everybody just, if you don't cram near the stage, you don't really get to hear anything.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, what? Pardon my ignorance, but I mean, I know of the Crystal Palace Bowl, and I remember different shows happening there. Obviously, I didn't get anywhere near it. But what happened to it?
And I've no idea.
Did it just shut down? I mean, it's just quite a famous venue from the early to mid-70s, but then it just kind of fell off the radar. So I'm just wondering if he knocked it down or something. I don't know.
I shall find out. And a decent lineup as well. You've got Mountain and the Faces as well as Floyd. He says that the rain came down with relentless fury just as Pink Floyd opened the set with Return of the Son of Nothing, ironically enough. For the audience, it was really an exercise in endurance. Those that could huddled for shelter under the available sheets of polythene. I presume he means from the weather, not from Pink Floyd's music.
Yeah, I mean, now you think to see Pink Floyd in 1971, you wouldn't mind getting wet, would you? But
of course not.
That's a game with the benefit of hindsight.
All right. And also, Peter Lee goes to see The Who in Liverpool. Didn't say exactly where. He said over 2,000 tickets were sold within 2 days for a surprise concert by The Who. And with no publicity whatsoever, The Who are frequent visitors to Liverpool. And this time we were treated to an exclusive preview of their forthcoming album, which should be completed by June. So this is early 71. He's talking about Who's Next, of course, which is a classic.
Right.
He said the entire first half of their act was new material. Each of the 10 new songs was a gem. At least The Who have found something to replace Tommy. No titles were given for the new songs, but I guess some of them were called The Bargain, Too Much of Anything, Time Is Passing, which didn't make the final cut, and the future single, which is a departure from the usual for the group, Behind Blue Eyes, which we'd like to play, but we haven't really got time at all, have we?
No, we haven't. Yeah, we're going to play David Ansel Collins, aren't we? Double barrel. Thanks very much, Bobbert.
Thank you, mate.
Enjoyed that very much. Just to say, we have got Callum Easter live in session tomorrow night, and Gideon Coe is next, and thanks for listening. Ta-ta, everybody.
And the magnificent. I'm back, baby.
Marc Riley, BBC Six Music.
And shut the door on your way out.